If you saw an 80-year-old woman trembling alone in the rain, no family, no shelter, what would you do? Would you offer her a warm blanket, a bowl of soup, or maybe just a kind look of compassion? Could something so small really change someone's destiny? And what if I told you that single act of kindness touched the heart of a billionaire, watching quietly from across the street? Would you believe it? Today's story takes you on an extraordinary journey with Sophie, a young waitress working at a rundown diner in the heart of New York City, who unknowingly reached into the heart of Victor, the CEO of one of the largest financial empires in the country. Stick with me through the entire story, where one rainy night connected two people from vastly different worlds, all through a fragile thread called kindness. If you love heartwarming, inspiring, and deeply human stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because here, every video is a doorway to warmth in a cold world. Let's begin. Part 1. The Waitress in a cold, concrete city. In the heart of bustling New York City, where towering skyscrapers seem to block out even the gentlest rays of human warmth, there sat a tiny old diner named Rosie's. It looked as though it had been frozen in time for decades. Its neon sign flickered in and out like a heartbeat on its last leg, and the paint on the worn wooden tables had long since peeled away, revealing both decay and something oddly comforting. It was there that Sophie worked, 26 years old, her eyes always carrying a soft glow. Though her wages barely covered the essentials, she never once complained. People often said Sophie had something special, not beauty in the conventional sense, but something rarer. The way she listened intently to every customer, how she smiled at the homeless who wandered in just asking for a glass of water, or the way she gave a subtle nod to the bus driver every early morning, as if to say, "I see you too." Sophie lived alone in a tiny apartment at the end of the street. And every night after closing her shift, she would carefully pack up the leftover food, not for herself, but to share with the homeless people she passed on her walk home. "It's just a meal," she'd often say with a quiet sigh. "But maybe it'll keep someone warm for one more night." One early winter evening, with a cold drizzle fogging up the glass of every shop window, Sophie made her usual walk home. Under the awning of a nearly deserted bus stop, she saw an elderly woman, 80, maybe more, frail and trembling in a threadbare coat. Her cloudy eyes watched the passing traffic, hopeful but unseen. No one stopped. No one looked. Except Sophie. She paused for a split second. Then her steps grew firm as she approached. "Ma'am, are you cold? I work at the diner just around the corner. Would you come with me? It's much warmer there than out here." There was no need for further explanation. The look in the woman's eyes said everything. And in that cold, rainy night, the image of a young woman gently guiding an old soul into the soft yellow glow of a forgotten diner was quietly watched from across the street. Inside a sleek black car, a man sat still, unmoving, unreadable, but something deep inside him stirred. A feeling he hadn't felt in years. Something that had once been warmth. Part 2. The Man in the Shadows. Across the street, a sleek black car sat quietly, its engine still warm. Yet the eyes of the man inside were as cold as a first frost in early winter. Victor, a billionaire known throughout New York's investment circles, had just come from a grueling day-long series of boardroom meetings. Despite his reputation as one of the city's most powerful men, he held on to a strange ritual, driving alone through working-class neighborhoods at night, to feel something real, as he once put it. No one knew exactly why a man like Victor would spend his nights cruising down crumbling back streets, through neighborhoods filled with worn-out storefronts and blue-collar workers barely making ends meet. Perhaps, buried deep beneath layers of power and privilege, he still carried the memory of a woman long gone. His mother, a poor scrap collector who raised him alone and died quietly in a rented room with no one to hold her hand. Tonight, he had stopped in front of Rosie's diner, by chance, just as a young waitress stepped out into the rain and wrapped her coat around an elderly homeless woman, gently helping her into the diner. No cameras, no audience, no applause, just him, watching. Victor froze. He had seen countless people give to charity for a photo op. He had lost count of how many times the word compassion had been plastered across magazine covers, hollow and staged. But he had never seen kindness offered so quietly, so instinctively. The girl, Sophie, had no idea that her small act of warmth had shaken something inside a man who thought he no longer had a soul to stir. Victor didn't sleep that night. He memorized the name of the diner, etched Sophie's face into memory, then returned to his sterile penthouse, surrounded by priceless paintings and multi-million-dollar contracts. Yet all he could see was her, those delicate hands gently wrapping a scarf around someone society had long stopped seeing. "Why her?" he murmured. "What is it about her that I can't stop thinking about?" It wasn't beauty. It wasn't her voice. It was her eyes. Eyes filled with empathy, not pity. The next day, Victor made a decision. He would go back. But not just to watch. He wanted to look her in the eye. He needed to know. Was Sophie truly different? Or was that moment just a coincidence, captured by fate, at the exact time he happened to be watching? Part 3. The Unplanned Encounter. The next morning, the sky was still overcast. Heavy gray clouds loomed over New York, as if foreshadowing that something unexpected was about to happen. Rosie's diner began to fill with life. The warm scent of fresh-baked pastries and coffee drifted through the cozy space. Sophie, like every other day, tied on her apron, busily wiped down tables, arranged silverware, and despite the dark circles under her eyes from a sleepless night, a gentle smile still lingered on her lips. The front door chimed softly as a man stepped inside. A tailored gray suit, polished leather shoes, and eyes that held something deep. His presence silenced the diner for just a moment. No one knew who he was, but everyone could sense he wasn't ordinary. Sophie turned around and saw the unfamiliar customer choosing a seat by the window. Though briefly taken aback, she kept her welcoming smile, as she always did. "Good morning, please make yourself comfortable. We just pulled a fresh apple pie out of the oven today." Victor gave a faint smile, his eyes attentively following every small movement she made. Nothing seemed forced. No fake cheer, just simple kindness radiating from her gaze, her words, even the way she carried the tray in her arms. He ordered a modest breakfast, but instead of eating, he spent most of his time quietly observing. She wasn't just serving food, she was caring for each customer like family. Helping an elderly lady count her change, refilling water for the old man in the corner, gently resting a hand on the shoulder of a single mother whose baby was wailing at the table. No one in the diner realized that Victor's presence was anything out of the ordinary. And Sophie had no idea that the man sitting silently in the corner was the CEO of one of America's leading financial empires, a man whose handshake could alter the futures of hundreds. After finishing his meal, Victor left a white envelope tucked beneath the empty plate and exited quietly without a word. Outside, the clouds began to part, sunlight breaking softly through, reflecting against the car window as he looked back one last time. Within him stirred a quiet belief. This world still has people who live with their hearts. Back inside, Sophie picked up the envelope and opened it, then stood frozen, her hands trembling. Inside was a stack of cash and a small handwritten note with just one simple line. "Thank you for reminding me what real kindness looks like." Part 4. The Unnamed Letter. That night, Sophie sat in her tiny apartment, the one where the wooden window always whistled when the weather turned cold. She laid the envelope on her table, eyes fixed on the handwritten note in elegant script. "Thank you for reminding me what real kindness looks like." No name, no phone number, not a single clue, just gratitude, and a gift far too generous, leaving Sophie feeling overwhelmed. She didn't think she deserved it. She had only done what her heart told her was right. But deep inside, Sophie felt that something had shifted. Not because of the money, but because of a feeling. For once, she was no longer invisible in this fast-moving world. The next day, Sophie returned to the diner with mixed emotions. She wanted to ask the owner if anyone had left a message or contact information, but no one knew who the man was. Just after the lunch rush, the bell above the door rang again. A well-dressed man with calm eyes stepped inside, a fellow waiter awkwardly approached Sophie. He said, "He'd like you to be his server." Sophie turned around, and her heart skipped a beat. It was him, the man from yesterday, but this time there was something different, something deeper. He no longer hid behind silence. His eyes were warm, as if inviting her into a conversation without words. "What would you like to order today, sir?" Sophie asked, trying to steady her voice. "The most special thing here, but only if you'll join me for a cup of coffee after your shift." He smiled gently. Sophie frowned slightly, both surprised and cautious. But in his eyes, there was no hint of flirtation, only sincerity. Throughout the meal, he didn't say much, yet he watched her with a quiet attentiveness, as though trying to memorize each of her gestures. And when Sophie brought the check to his table, he slipped her a folded note along with the receipt. "I once witnessed something extraordinary. A young woman, soaked in rain, helping a complete stranger, an elderly woman, into a warm diner, offering her shelter and a bowl of soup. No one asked you to do that, but you did. I just want to know, why?" Sophie looked at him for a moment, then quietly replied, "Because she could have been my mother, my grandmother, and if I were ever in her place, I'd hope someone would stop, just for a moment." And for the first time, the man named Victor, one of the most private billionaires in America, nodded, not because of a successful deal, not for a headline, but because he had just discovered something priceless, pure kindness, needing no reason and no recognition. Part 5, a revealed identity and a life-changing gift. 2 days after that strange conversation, Sophie still couldn't shake the question lingering in her mind. Who was that man? Why did he care so much about her? And what moved him so deeply about a gesture that, to her, had felt so simple? One late afternoon, as the golden light of day filtered through the diner's windows, Victor returned. This time, he wasn't the quiet man tucked away in the corner. He arrived with a clear gaze, like someone who had already made up his mind. Sophie greeted him with her usual gentle smile, but before she could even ask for his order, he calmly placed an envelope on the table and said, "Before you bring me the menu, open this." Sophie hesitated, her hands slightly trembling as she tore the envelope open. Inside was a bank check, made out in the amount of $100,000, and alongside it, a simple business card. Victor Raymond, CEO, Raymond Global Holdings. Sophie froze, then slowly looked up. "You're..." Victor nodded, deliberately. "Yes, I'm the founder of the largest construction firm on the East Coast. But that's not as important as this. You reminded me there are things in this world worth more than money." Before Sophie could say a word, he continued, "I recently purchased a small cafe just a few blocks from here. As of today, it's yours. You can turn it into whatever you dream of, a safe haven for the homeless, a warm corner for the struggling, or simply a place called Sophie's." Sophie's eyes welled with tears. She had never dared to dream this big. She was just a simple girl working day and night to survive another month. But today, her life had changed. "But why me?" she asked, her voice breaking. Victor looked at her. His eyes, no longer cold, softened. "Because I was once an orphan. I know what it feels like to be left behind in this world. And that day, when you placed a coat over that old woman's shoulders, I saw my mother in you." That one sentence squeezed something deep inside Sophie's chest. It turned out that kindness, even in its smallest form, can echo through the heart of a man who seemed frozen in the heights of power. That evening, Sophie didn't walk home empty-handed. She walked away carrying a chance. But more than that, she carried living proof that, when you plant seeds of kindness, life has a way of returning blessings far beyond what you ever imagined. Part 6, the cafe called Light. And its first days, Sophie named her cafe Light. Not just because it was what the old woman lacked that freezing rainy night, but because it symbolized the faith Victor had placed in her, unconditionally. With the gifted funds, she didn't just renovate the space, she also set aside part of it to establish a small foundation called the Kind Soup Fund, serving free hot meals to the homeless every evening. On opening day, it rained again. Not the piercing cold rain of that fateful night, but a soft drizzle, just enough to remind her of where this all began. The first person to walk into the cafe wasn't a wealthy patron, but an elderly man in a worn-out coat, his hair nearly white. He tucked himself quietly into a corner, shivering from the cold. Sophie didn't need to ask. She gently placed a bowl of steaming porridge in front of him and smiled. "Here you go, sir. No one goes hungry in this place." A little while later, the door opened again. It was Wendy, the server who had once worked with Sophie at her old diner. Wendy rushed over and hugged her, eyes glistening. "You did it, and I'm sure your mom is smiling down on you from above." Day by day, Light became more than a cafe. It became a sanctuary for lives often forgotten. Elderly people with nowhere to go, struggling students needing a quiet place to study, or those who simply needed a warm good morning, all found something of their own within these walls. Victor stopped by one late afternoon, standing silently from a distance. He didn't go inside. He simply smiled through the glass, watching Sophie wipe down tables and chat with a lost little boy. He knew deep down he had made the right decision. Kindness can be planted in the smallest places, and one day it will bloom into something extraordinary. Sophie was no longer the girl simply working to survive. She had become a woman of purpose, someone who inspires, who dares to give, to dream big, and to live by what's right. As night fell, the sign reading "Light" still glowed through the gentle drizzle, like a small candle in a vast city. Not to drive away the darkness, but to remind the world of this simple truth. Inside every heart, there is a light. All it needs is someone willing to ignite it. Part 7. The Elderly Woman and the Final Revelation. On an early winter morning, as the last of the autumn leaves touched the pavement, Sophie was preparing to open the cafe when she heard a soft knock at the door. Standing beneath the awning was the same elderly woman, frail, petite, her cloudy eyes now shining with something inexplicably clear. "How did you know I'd be here?" Sophie asked, her voice trembling as she rushed to help her in. The woman smiled, her shaky hand wrapping around Sophie's. "Did you think I would forget? That soup's aroma, that voice, the warmth of a kind soul's touch, those things stay with you." They sat by the window where the soft light spilled in like an embrace. The woman shared that she had spent weeks searching for the Light Cafe after someone had told her about a place run by a young woman who gave without ever expecting anything in return. Then slowly, she lowered her gaze and pulled a faded photograph from her old handkerchief. It was a picture of a little girl, no more than 5 years old, with bright eyes and a dimpled smile. It was Sophie. Sophie froze. That photo, only her mother had it. Her heart skipped a beat. The old woman laid her hand gently over the photo and whispered like a breeze, "I am your mother." Time seemed to stop. Sophie's eyes widened, her breath shallow. She had lived all her life believing her mother had died in an accident. But here she was. This frail, forgotten woman Sophie had once helped as a stranger was her own mother. Tears fell silently. Sophie threw her arms around her, sobbing. Her mother explained that after the accident years ago, she lost her memory and had wandered through life like a homeless soul. Only recently had fragments of her past begun to return, and with them, an unexplainable pull, a yearning to find her daughter, to follow that familiar feeling and hope for one last reunion. That morning was not just a reunion, it was a miracle. Victor, upon hearing the news, quietly came by the cafe. He didn't come inside. He simply left a small box at the door. Inside was a note. "I invested in the right person. Light never dies when passed on through love." From that day on, Light was no longer just a cafe. It became a symbol of kindness, of miracles, and of reunions no one could have foreseen. And Sophie, once just a lonely girl, now had her mother, a place to call home, and a mission. To light hope in hearts that believed they were lost. A cup of coffee, an 80-year-old woman, a stranger in an apron, and a billionaire silently witnessing it all during a rainy night. We often think changing a life requires something monumental, but sometimes it all begins with something incredibly small. Someone offers help, without knowing who's watching. Someone quietly observes, only to give away an opportunity that money could never buy. Faith in humanity. And the twist that leaves everyone speechless is that by the end of this story, Sophie didn't just receive a coffee shop. She became a symbol of compassion in a world that often feels ruled by profit and calculation. Do you think that one day when you help a stranger, someone else might be watching and getting ready to change your life? If you believe in the power of kindness, like this video, comment your thoughts below and share this story with someone who might need a ray of hope right now. And don't forget to subscribe, because we'll meet again soon on another unforgettable journey of emotion. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. Goodbye for now, and see you in the next story.